So I will be discussing the kind of pre-production and production of this independent animated film that took just about 16 weeks to create. And I'll be going over some of the more technical aspects as well as just some more detailed aspects of the production process that I went through that you can see fully developed in the part of the clips seen here. So now we're going to talk about the pre-production stage that's necessary for any time you really create a build or personal film such as this. So for me, in this 3-minute long film, the things that I did was I created a log line, a synopsis, and I even created a script as well as mood boards, a pre-visualization, and as well as some storyboards, which I'll be showing you some of right now. So here is a script that I had written out, and since I knew this would be 3 minutes, and I know a page of a script is typically about a minute, I tried to keep it to be about 3 pages or less. It ended up being more than that, which I was pressed for time when I did have to go to record those lines. So that was something that ended up being more trouble later. So I did end up cutting a lot of those lines because of the time limit that I had. So here's some of the mood boards and concept art that I had created. Drawing these like recording lines and things because I knew I wanted that. And these are like the main shots that I had visualized in my head that I really wanted to have, and that I think I do end up having mostly in the film. So like this is the bedroom, this shot, which all of these models are here, but I think the lighting in the actual environment ended up a little too dark to where you don't really see a lot of this. And I knew from early on I wanted to have a flashlight element showing the doll in the hallways. And there's more close up of my original concept of the doll, which was a more porcelain and cracked doll, but I ended up actually going for a more straw doll type because it was difficult for me to model this because I had never modeled a character before. And I was gonna try to do this for the first time, so I ended up doing more of a straw and like sewn doll instead. And here's kind of like a color palette that I was doing. And this is honestly the main thing that helped me the most was drawing out a house layout, like a realistic house layout, and the path that I wanted the camera to take with these blue lines, as well as some props. And then here's the actual storyboard with the camera movements and everything, which I did follow pretty much. And it was just the timing itself that was figuring it out, which I did with a pre-visualization. I worked on timing more. So this is the pre-visualization of my environment that I had previously blocked out into Maya and then kind of just brought the whole scene into Unreal so I could get a good look at how I wanted the camera to kind of function and get those movements really down as well as the timing. And I did end up actually doing more timing and movements in the completed film, but this did give me a good idea of the overall layout as well as how I wanted the camera to move. And as you can see with the block out, the actual like furniture and kind of arrangement of the models stayed pretty true to this block out. The only things that really changed from the block out to the final product would be the exact path that the camera took, as well as some of the exact motions, as well as timing, as the final film is about double the time that this previs is, as well as the actual ending. I initially had the camera go outside and be escaped and then get pulled back in, and then have this ending shot where it would show the house again. But as I wanted to stay under 3 minutes, that was something I had cut. So this is actually the main house. I built, for every model that we see in the environment, I built it and modeled it in Maya and then brought it as an FBX into Unreal. So this is the main house layout. And what I did was I kind of built it haphazardly, I'll say, because I knew I wasn't going to be seeing the outside. The way I would be going into it was just I'd be camera cutting to go on to the inside. And so that's the only section that you would really see. So this is how it kind of looks. It's just kind of bare. And I modeled all of the walls and these little hallway separators and even the trim and all of this section. And this roof part, I know I didn't see the roof during my actual video recording. I created a roof like this with a hole in it just for some light to kind of come through. One of my initial ideas was to cut an entire hole in this wall and put a window in there for some more light, but I realized I wanted to put bookshelves and a couch on that wall instead. So yeah, and initially I had, let me just hide the roof actually. Initially, so this is the floor plan, which is pretty similar to my concept art. Yeah. Let me just hide these. Yeah, so here's the floor plan. And initially I did have, so I have 2 rooms here and I had another room here, and my plan was to create an entire kitchen model and another room model, but I realized that it wasn't necessary to actually build those rooms because the path of my camera is only going to be following this path here into this room and then this way and then back out. So I realized it wasn't necessary to do any extra work, and so I would just put a wall here later and keep this wall here and basically hide those areas from being seen. The reason the colors are all funky is because I separated it into different materials like this and like this, so that when I brought it into Unreal it would be easier to actually create the materials for the walls and the roof and things like that, and even the door over here. Okay. So this is how I got my first person point of view to really look like a handheld camera, because that's what I was going for. So this is actually started out as a third person camera. I just renamed it as a BP first person camera. And so what that does is this starts out with the camera kind of back here like that. I'll make this bigger. Like this. So the camera's behind the character. And what I did is I just moved it in and I parented it with this parent socket, parented it to the head joint. So basically everywhere I looked in the scene, the camera would be looking through there to kind of mimic the handheld version. And something else that I wanted to do was have a flashlight component, so that there would be a flashlight sticking in through the arm, so that everywhere I turned and looked, it would look like that the character was holding a flashlight as well. So at first I did pair it to the arm, and after some troubleshooting, I found that having it kind of be put towards the middle of the body ended up looking better. But yeah, and I did parent that to the spring arm so it would kind of move with the body and look really nice there. And here's some settings for the light to make it look more like a flashlight. And as for the character itself, just some quick functions. So so it can sprint, stop sprinting. And then something else I really wanted to be able to control was that I could zoom out basically. Um, I wanted to, while I was in game, while I clicked play in in-game mode, I wanted to be able to control the camera zoom function instead of having to do that in post. So it would feel more like a game and feel more like I was holding a camera and I could control it that way. So this is the function that I created to be able to do that. And so that's pretty much, here's the other thing. Most of this comes with it when you create a blueprint for a third person or first person camera. And this is also the jump input function. So I'm able to jump with a space bar. However, I didn't use that very much, just walking around in the scene. But yes, so here's most of the event graph for the character. And then now with this, I was ready to walk around into my environment and record through this camera. As we move into the outside environment, I want to show an example of how I actually was able to record through the first person point of view camera. Even though I was able to set up this blueprint for the first person camera and was able to play through that camera when I hit play, and that's how I was able to move through my environment, being able to actually record footage through that camera was a separate problem that I ran into and was something that it took a while for me to actually figure out. But in case that's something that you're looking to do as well, here's the method for how I did it. So first you want to make sure that your play mode is set into Pi. So basically it goes into a new editor window. And then you want to get out the take recorder. This is how we will be recording our sequence. And it'll pop up the sequencer as well. Here I have this out for the last time I was doing it. All right, so basically what we're going to be doing is when we record, a new actor is going to be popping up here, and that's what we're going to be adding as our source. If you try to add the source now of the blueprint, it won't work properly. So now we're going to click play, and as you can see, it starts miniature because I have the camera size for the other level. So it's just going to look like we're in a Bug's Life right now, but that's okay. So I'm going to do source from actor in this yellow BP first person camera. All right, I'm going to bring back that window. There we are. And then I'm going to hit record. And I'm going to also bring back, so you see it'll give us a nice little countdown. And so this is how I filmed, I'm going to ignore this right now. So this is how I filmed my film. And yeah, so it looks like we're in the Bug's Life right now. This is funny, but yeah. So this is pretty nice. And as you can see, it is recording in the sequencer as well. And that's how I also did some other animations with lights and some chairs moving and the doll, as well as I added those actors to track into the sequencer. I'll just zoom in there. Ta-da. But yeah. Okay. So a smart method when creating a large environment, especially in Unreal Engine, is to split up that environment into multiple levels. That's what I did with this one. I created just a kind of front of the house, since the camera is only going to be going up to the door. So as you can see, the side and the back actually has nothing there, just some lights and fog, because the camera goes up to the door, opens it, and then I do a camera cut. And with that camera cut, I actually just go to this other level. Right. And so with that other level, what happens is with the cut, they actually cut to right here past this door, past this like fake door that I have here. And it shows that we're already inside. And so that's just something else that I think is good practice, is to kind of split up large environments so you're not trying to fit everything all together. So here's another blueprint that I created to kind of ease the amount of animation work that I would have to do. So I for my character to kind of be able to walk through this environment, there's a lot of doors that have to be opened. And while for some of them I used camera cuts to kind of avoid having to animate that, for the bedroom door, what I did was I created a blueprint to kind of have a physics constraint, to where the door would actually just swing open when the character, with the blueprint, with the blueprint first person camera. So when that character walks up to this door, there's actually a constraint box around here. And so what that does is that when the character interacts with that, it will just push open this door and open it. And that kind of helps give the illusion that the person is opening the door. And what I do is I make sure to not look at the doorknob while that's happening, instead of having to go through and create a hand and animate a hand grabbing the doorknob and opening that. But yeah, so here's the blueprint for that. Here's the actual event graph. Never mind. Things don't want to look nice. Okay, here's the actual event graph of how this is working. So here's the enable, disable area, and then here's the open and close door. So basically, this is my first method where I would press E when the character was in the constraint box, and the door would open. And this would work sometimes, but I'm not really sure why it wouldn't work every time. So what I ended up doing was doing this physics door where it would just push open instead. Okay, so here's an example of how that works. So normally when I'm actually trying to do the level, I will not look at the doorknob, but as you can see, my character can just push this door open like that, and it does do a little bit of a swing. But when I'm actually recording my video, I don't look at that. It's kind of like smart recording. In the same way, to get out is kind of a show. So another nice subtle effect that I did is these floating dust particles that are kind of hanging around. And if I click here, you can kind of really see the amount that is in here. So let me just go to this real quick so we can look at this. So this is one of Unreal's Niagara particle effects. And the way that this was created is, if I just go back to content drawer, you can just do add Niagara system. And what I did was new from selected emitter, and I did a hanging particle. And what that does is gets just one of these systems, and I didn't edit it too much. I just kind of renamed it and messed around with a lot of the particle update properties and the emitter and particle spawn. These are the three properties that you really kind of mess with the most. That and the sprite renderer. This is where you can create your own material to change the shape of the dust. And what I did is I created my own material here, where it's basically just like a floating sphere with an opacity mask to make sure it's not completely see-through but not completely solid either. And you can completely customize your dust. I know I've used other particles in the past to make fire and things like that, where I would use material to make cool shapes that kind of end up looking like fires or flowers or things like that. But yeah, so I have this kind of spread out all throughout here to kind of give it a nice abandoned look. Another nice subtle effect, not really an effect, but a detail I like to add is these spider webs up in the corner. Well, I know they're kind of looking a little stylized, not too realistic. While my environment was pretty dark, so like there's one in this corner and it's pretty hard to tell, and around the other corners usually this light's not on unless it's during the gameplay. It's a strobing light, so while it does strobe you can get a glimpse of these spider webs, and that's a nice detail that you're able to see. So the way this was done, I can click on it, is that it's really just kind of like a opacity mask with an alpha on there, with a grass wind effect on there to make it kind of move and wiggle a little bit. So this material, it's masked default lit, and the most important thing for this is that the actual texture sample here, click there, is that it's a black and white channel. I guess it can be colored, but the important thing for the opacity mask is that it's black and white. But this I drew up in Photoshop based off of some references online on how a spider web looks, and I just quickly drew that in Photoshop, making sure it was a square. Imported it through here and then set up this material, and then what I did was created a plane through Unreal's modeling feature up here, and placed that plane up here, and then applied that material, the webbing material, on there. So it's basically just a bunch of planes with a material. This was my way of creating sprites in the Unreal Engine environment, similar to how sprites are made in Maya. Which I know there's other methods, but this was the method that worked best for me. That's the same way I made all of these decals on here. You can see here, these are also rectangles with a opacity kind of decal on here, that I also made in Photoshop. The difference is that I made a opacity map, and then I also imported a base color map as well, making sure those are both a square. And this one is actually a material instance that I created, and then kind of just repeated it along the walls to create a nice grimy feel. That's the same with a lot of these texture stamps I have here, like this mold texture, which I believe I got from Substance Painter. One of those I just painted on a square and then exported from there, which I exported from there. Same with the blood stains. That's using the same method from Substance Painter. I know there's some right here. These are kind of dirt stains, but they look like blood stain. That's a blood stain. That's all using the same sprite method. That's for all those same decals. So for all the trees and little bushes that I had in my environment, I used those with Houdini's Side Effects Labs tree generators, basically using this node structure with tree controllers, tree trunk and branch generators, as well as the tree leaf generators, and basically just kind of layering those nodes on top of each other. As you can see, we kind of start with the one trunk and you just kind of build it up from there, adding more and more branches, and then adding on one layer of leaves to adding more and more and more layers until it starts to look like a more and more full tree. And this was really nice, as then I could procedurally kind of create a set of trees instead of having to model a couple of trees, like hand model them. So that was a really nice way to be able to do that, and I would use a lot of the attributes in here, especially like the noise, the meshing, and the tropism especially for the tree branch generators and the trunk generators. So that would allow for a lot of variety. As you can see here, I could change the branch nodes. That would be changing the tree here, and things like that. What I have it set to right now is that for my scene, I set it to randomize for a certain amount of frames. So what I did was I actually exported a couple of trees based on the frames. So I went down here and I clicked play, and I said for the next 10 trees that come out with the next 10 frames, let me export each one of those. So that way in my scene I have a nice variety with that, and I don't have just the same tree over and over again. As you can see, it procedurally generates a nice new tree with each new frame. So that was my system with using the Houdini Side Effects Labs tree generator. And then I just exported it into Maya. And here's one of them put into Maya, and was able to UV it from there. Although it had some of its own UVs from Houdini, it was a lot better to UV it from here, especially because each of the leaves share the same UV set, so those were pretty easy to do. And then from there, just export it as an FBX into Unreal Engine. So another thing I did to help create this environment is a method for putting the foliage around. So for the trees, as I showed, I created them in Houdini, and I just kind of hand placed these. I have some dead tree variants out on the outside of the fence, and these trees just kind of placed around. But for the grass itself, and if I click on it, you can kind of see just how much grass there is. So instead of having to hand place all of that, what I did was a foliage painter tool in Unreal Engine. So I'll go to that and show just that method. So as you can see here, you're able to import any kind of model that you'd like to go ahead and paint into the environment. So what I did was I created some simple grass models using some curve tools in Maya. And I can open one up here, and it is tiny. So there is one, here's another, just some simple curves to really, and I just made a couple of them here, and I had some trees in here as well. And so really what you want to do is you can just check mark which ones you want to paint with. Say I'm going to paint with these, and I'm going to go paint, I'll go paint over here in the beautiful sun, and I'll just make it bright for right now so we can see what we're doing. If I can, and I'll turn off the hype fog because it's foggy. There we go. All right. So this is basically the method that I did for all this grass. So you can see this bubble. Make it a little darker. There we go. So we can see this bubble that we have. So that is basically the brush size. You can see this paint, that's the brush size and the paint density. So these are totally customizable. So if I brush here, you can see only the grass pieces I have selected are the ones that are being brushed. So I can check this one as well, and this one as well, and now these will be painted, which I really do like these tall pieces the most. I believe that's what's giving this nice really grass looking. Let me turn up the density some more, and that'll make it kind of more full. But yeah, so that was my main method for really just kind of populating this environment, which now you can kind of see it in the daylight with the trees and the front of the house. So this was another kind of method that I had. While a lot of my textures, I did just go into Substance Painter and kind of not hand paint, but like hand texture, where I would use smart materials. I did occasionally use some procedural textures, for the most part, when actually applying them into Unreal Engine, this was the main method I had used, where I would create a master material with these kind of nodes where I would plug in the base color, the normal, and the orange, which is has the ambient occlusion map, the roughness map, and the metal map all kind of baked in together. And it's like that for each one of the texture sets that I had exported. And then these nodes over here are actually so I can change the UVs as a parameter. And so what I would do is create this as a master material and then create that as a material instance. So do right click, create material instance off of that. And that could be like in my like floor. Say I was making a floor texture and I was just searching for that, so that's why that's not there. And then here that is. Hello. And so then this is what I would do. I would go in here and just click each of these and replace it with the new one I was importing. And then same with the UVs if I wanted to change them up. And so this is my method mainly for texturing all of my main objects. So instead of having to recreate the material like this every time I wanted to make a material, this was kind of my main method. And then I have some other master materials for that have emission or that I want a hue shift or things like that.